Hello, good morning, everyone. I'm honored to have two speakers from Hong Kong today. We have Fish Ip, who is a union organizer for domestic workers. She's a founding member of the Hong Kong Domestic Workers General Union and the Hong Kong Federation of Asian Domestic Workers Unions, organizing both local and migrant workers. She wears another hat, as she's also the Asia Regional Coordinator for the International Domestic Workers Federation. With Fish, speaking with Fish, we have Shiella Estrada, and she's been working as a migrant domestic worker for 35 years in Hong Kong and Singapore. A union leader for over 30 years, she founded several migrant workers unions, including the Progressive Labor Union of Domestic Workers in Hong Kong, PLU, and the Hong Kong Federation of Domestic Workers Unions. So welcome, Shiella. And special welcome to Fish and Shiella, as it's quite late their time in Hong Kong, who are both working with and in the case of Shiella is a domestic worker. And I'd just like to ask, the first question is to Fish about, can you give us some arguments as to why domestic workers should be considered childcare workers? Because so often in these debates around childcare, domestic workers are not considered to be childcare workers, even though they provide some of these services. Over to you, Fish.
Yes, thank you, Rachel. Good day, good night, everybody. Joining from you with IDWF, the International Domestic Workers Federation. Joining with me today is Shiella Estrada, a migrant domestic worker in Hong Kong for over 30 years, the chair of Progressive Labor Union of Domestic Workers in Hong Kong. So domestic workers are really the crucial part of the childcare workforce. Rich countries, especially in Asia, the work has been very much won by migrant domestic workers who are only temporary migrants, meaning no matter how many years they are working in the destinations, they don't enjoy rights of residency. They come to take care of the children, elderly, and families in the destinations, leaving their own children, parents, and families behind without social protections for their own children and families. And when they get old, they have to go back to home countries without pension. So today, I want to focus on childcare and migrant domestic workers, as this is a growing phenomenon that the richer destinations like Hong Kong, Singapore, Taiwan, Malaysia depend so much on migrant domestic workers to bear the childcare work. And the world has over 70 million domestic workers and 11.5 million are migrant domestic workers. And the migrant domestic workers compose higher proportion of domestic workers population, especially in high income countries, as you can see on the screen. And in Hong Kong, 13% households are hiring 390,000 migrant domestic workers. In Singapore, 20% households, 1/5 of households are hiring 250,000 migrant domestic workers. And high income countries, here you can see the governments are spending so little on childcare. You can see here in Hong Kong and Singapore, they spend only 0.20% of the GDP on childcare and primary services or educations. Government-aided childcare services in Hong Kong for babies less than 2 years is only 1 per 114, and households really depend on the grandparents and largely on migrant domestic workers to provide childcare. And in average, a household saves more than $700 when a migrant domestic worker is hired to provide the work. So I've mentioned the destination's dependence on migrant domestic workers on childcare. Now I pass over to Shiella Estrada to share to share how she and her fellow workers handle the childcare left behind. Over to you, Sheila.
Hi, thank you, Fish. Thank you, everyone, and thank you for inviting us here today. As a migrant domestic worker mother of two, I can see in the Philippines there's a Migrant Workers Act that it's an act that institute the policies of overseas employment and establish standard of protection and promotion of the welfare of migrant workers, their families, and overseas Filipino in distress, and for other families. The Department of Labor, the Department of Social Welfare and Development, and the Department of Justice join hands to protect children of overseas Filipinos. But through this situation of the act, we have the Department of Labor through the Overseas Workers Welfare Administration also signed a mutual understanding with the Department of Social Welfare and Development and the Department of Justice for the provision of full protection to children left behind by OFWs. I mean, OFWs is the Overseas Filipino Workers. Violence against children stated that migration is one of the reasons of physical, sexual, psychological violence to children. This is real, that is happening really in our country, and this is our own experience. Under the agreement of the Overseas Workers Welfare, it will intensify child protection campaigns on violence against children. The overseas Filipino workers raised concerns by conducting regular consultations and monitoring of family of welfare officers, dissemination of the child abuse and exploitations information, and assist in the distribution of materials to the overseas Filipino workers family circle and OFW help desk. Integrate child abuse and exploitation module prepared by the DSWD in the conduct of trainings and orientations of overseas Filipinos and their families and report suspected cases or incidents of child abuse to the DSWD and DOJ and other law enforcement authorities. It was been an executive order that DSWD to take the lead in its implementing rules and regulations, giving psychosocial interventions, referrals of cases to OWA. Integrate issues and concerns of children of OFWs in the family development sessions and parenting effective sessions. Mutual of understanding complements with the Republic Act 7610 and Act of providing stronger deference and special protection against child abuse, exploitation and discrimination, and act of violence against women and their children. But with all this that I have said, we have all this kind of protection. But how many migrant domestic workers from Philippines know about this protection that we have in law? Because we really find out that the information dissemination was not really active and there's no monitoring either. So seems the protection was too good to see and to read, but the implementation is weak, especially to us mothers who our children was been left behind in the care of our siblings or to the grandparents of our children. Usually, we have a negative effect on the migration work. It's been a long time call for the union and other partners in the Philippines and global partners calling for the Philippines to make it a choice of the migration work. It's not a necessity for family because we've been suffering a lot, like on the gap on the relationship with our children's. That's why we're calling for a decent work with a decent living wage, so that we can be with our children as most of our children grow grow old without their real mothers. So this is one problem we are almost every day that we're facing as migrant mothers. We've been trying to talk to the government to lessen migration. We all know that we cannot stop migration work, but to create jobs in our country, to prevent our children who suffered enough from separation of parents will be having the chance to work in the Philippines and not go for migration. But of course, we did not say migration will not be there. We always say that migration will still be there anywhere. And the only thing is just to lessen the effect of migration to families. I can share some of my friends and even my own experience when I left behind my 10 months old second born. When I go back to Philippines after a year, she never know me anymore as her mom. So, and then it grows a lot, and we do a lot of counseling either to parents in here whose their children suffered a lot of stress, and sometimes they have this mental thinking of the mom never loves them because it was been like for a long time we are away from them. So there's a lot of gaps on the relationship, the love, and how we connect with our children. But still, Philippines is one, we all know, is one of the, I think in Asia, it's the number one who's sending Filipino workers abroad. And I hope like this kind of forums, we can also share and ask the government and maybe some of the the panelists or the people here now in this forum can also think about lessening migration because of the negative effect from our own children. Um, we don't know that there's this kind of protection. Usually, if you are not in the trade union, of course, we you don't know this kind of information. So we are now educating more mothers, more parents to look into this protection, to use them, to take care of their own children. It's not only been in the care of siblings or then the mother or the grandparents, but there will be a protection coming from the government to those children who has been left behind. So the union will continue and our partners to call for this kind of protection for our children who has been left behind, to have more better protection while we are away. Um, I have 1 minute. I already have 1 minute, so maybe I can answer some of your questions if you have some for me. And thank you very much. Good evening.
Thank you, Sheila, and thank you for sharing from your own personal experience what has been a difficult experience, but I think highlighting also the cost to domestic workers of providing care services for others while their children may be lacking those care services back home. And I think that's really important for us to keep in mind as we think of the reorganization, the rebuilding of the social organization of care, as Selma has spoken about, and what that means for all workers within providing care services. And so thank you very much for that contribution. I'm